guess just very provocative, all three parts of your essay talk. I'm wondering though about the fit together the first part with the third part, because the first part you identify the probable racial and economic divide that's in our future if we continue as we're going, and I applaud you for bringing that to the fore, because I think that's a really good forecast, accurate forecast. Now, so then we come to your Ohio story at the end of the makers. I mean, it worked out okay for your one person, but do you think that's the future? As I look at the maker movement, I see that it's most likely to be taken up by young, college-educated white people whose parents will stake them as they do their woodworking or their microbrewery or whatever they're going to do, and they can have a chance to do this. What about the divide? Is this going to happen for the rest of the world that's not college educated? Many people of color in those circumstances. I mean,
yeah, it's a fantastic
I don't expect
question.
you to have the
it's a
answers.
fantastic question. I think
you've thought about it so much.
There's two questions embedded, I think. One is an economic question.
Yes.
Will the economy continue to grow? Will there still be more and more money? Will productivity continue to increase? The second question is about allocation and distribution. Will the 1% get more and more and more of this pie as it continues to grow? And the good news is, let me start with the bad news, actually, so I can end with the good news. The bad news is that I don't think that the US government, or many governments, frankly, have shown a capacity to anticipate enormous change and to act quickly on it. We tend to wait for crises to happen and then bunker down for 2 weeks and solve those crises, and then accidentally create other crises and then wait till those actually come to the fore and then solve them. But we're not very good at thinking proactively about changes that are going to come. That's the bad news. The good news is that it's completely within our capacity to design a distribution system, an economic distribution system, that works better than the current system. We can always increase the earned income tax credit. We can always increase the child tax credit. We can always write a law that says that that creates a federal millionaire tax bracket, which does not exist, and uses that money in order to help people who are currently living below the poverty line, the 35% of Americans living below 200% of the poverty line. These are choices that we can make. In a future where machines and algorithms and technology are doing ever more of the work, that should be a future of tremendous productivity growth, and therefore a future of GDP growth. And the question of how to divvy up the winners of GDP growth is a political question. And the good news is that politics is not robots. We elect human beings, and human beings can make up their own mind about what they think is fair and moral.
The problem is the humans who are electing.
The only problem is
I agree with you. That's right. We should be able to do a better job about that. I would like to pursue that, but let me not be selfish and just let me see where is the person with the mic? There she is. And who's got a question out here for Derek? I have many more questions. Over here.
Derek, great talk. It seems to me that your perspective was one of supply. Workers producing stuff, are they productive, et cetera. I wonder if you worry about demand, and in particular, if demand might collapse. So what I'm thinking of is, if there are fewer and fewer workers, now they don't have jobs and they don't have income, and so this productive economy is selling to who, because the who don't have the income to buy. So if there's a collapse in demand, then we could all be in trouble. You're not
painting a radical picture of the future. You're describing the past. In 2014, I think, the federal government had just reached a deal on the fiscal cliff. Remember the fiscal cliff, like 17,000 news cycles ago? So if I recall, with the deal with the fiscal cliff, there was a change made to a tax credit that was initially in the 2009 stimulus that reduced that tax credit for poor Americans. And 6 months later, Walmart found that its revenue had an enormous shock, and it had declined. And did Walmart blame its, did they say Americans don't like our new fashions, they don't like our new products? They said no. The reason that Walmart's spending declined is that the federal tax credit to poorer Americans ran out, so poor Americans had less money to spend at Walmart. Meaning, explicit in that interpretation is the idea that Walmart, it leans on government welfare in order to keep up its current projected level of revenue. That's the future that we're describing, a future where private sector demand relies on public sector decisions about how tax revenue is divided among rich and poor. So I absolutely see that as being a problem, and there are lots of economists, I think, who would say that one of the issues we've had with demand overall in the last how long has it been since 8 years since the economy started growing? That one of the biggest problems in the recovery is that the bottom 35% of Americans don't have enough money, and as a result, they're not spending more, and too much is being saved, or too much is being stored offshore by corporations, et cetera, et cetera. So I won't belabor the point, except merely to say that you are describing a present crisis, not painting a crisis that doesn't exist. And so, of course, it's something that we should be thinking about.
Yes. Go ahead.
Hi.
Hi.
I'm right here.
Oh, okay.
I can see you.
Okay, hi, I'm Leticia. Thank you for the opportunity to ask this question. At the beginning of your presentation, you were talking about the future population composition in terms of race and ethnicity, noting that the white population would become a minority of the workforce in the future. But really, in California, that's already happened. So in California, the white population is 39% of the population. But that has not translated into people of color, such as Hispanics and Blacks, being any kind of a meaningful part of the professional population, for example, here in Silicon Valley. As we know, most of the companies like Facebook and Google, they employ about 3% of their workforces, I know, are Hispanic, roughly, according to their data. So with all the occupational segregation that we have in our state, what you see, like if you go to Facebook, everybody who are in the servant kind of roles, people who are cooking the food and mopping the floors, that is who is Hispanic, and they're probably contractors and don't even get the benefits that you get at Facebook. But so have you, as you're talking about this diverse future, have you studied California? Because it looks to me like there's a huge lag time from the point where we are a major part of the workforce population until the Hispanics become any sort of a presence in the professional working world. That's what I've seen.
I mean, I think it's a fabulous point. I don't have too much to add to it because so much of what you said is well, it's spot on. I mean, California in so many ways is the edge of the present. Mm-hmm. It's not quite the future, but it's certainly at the furthest part of the present. I mean, not only in the way that it responds to environmental crises, but also its demographics, and I think in many ways its politics is suggestive of the future of the Democratic Party as well. So I think you're absolutely right. The only thing I guess I would say is that because this is a country that in order to have its labor force continue to grow is going to need lots of immigration, both skilled and unskilled, I think that it's important to keep two things in the air. One, the fact that we need more unskilled immigration, I think, to the United States in order to do lots of jobs that are the fastest growing, like home health care aides and home health aides. We need people. It's okay for people to come to the U.S. who don't necessarily have who aren't necessarily getting their PhD at Stanford. At the same time, that's of course not an excuse for racial inequity that continues to exist in practically every single sector in the U.S. economy. But I think those two things can be true at the same time.
Okay, thank you. Yes, over here.
Hi. How would you advise the next generation of political leadership to talk about the issues that you raised so beautifully in your talk in a way that could cross some political divides?
I almost feel like I should just pass the baton. And with that, our next speaker.
You can do that after you answer, okay?
I'll do that after I answer. Yeah, that was
Yes.
a preview. Well, so let me. I hope that your talk is going to. I know that your talk is going to be inspiring. So let me, or somewhat inspiring. So let me create the problem that is in need of inspiration. I think the central challenge of the future of American politics is going to be the challenge of multicultural egalitarianism.
Yes.
And I'm sorry that that's so many syllables. Here's why. I think that it's pretty clear that the future of the that a future of income inequality will require more redistribution, will require more welfare, will require more efforts to bring up the poor who are not brought along by the free market. And I don't see us moving to a post-capitalist system anytime soon. The most successful societies for robust welfare states tend to be monochromatic. Scandinavian countries have had really robust welfare states. Minneapolis, St. Paul did some fascinating things with metro economics, with revenue sharing, corporate tax revenue sharing from rich to poor districts in the 1960s. Minneapolis, St. Paul is kind of interesting, though, because they passed these laws, and a lot of really, really good affordable housing laws as well. They passed these laws when the city was 90% white. And now there's this enormous, I think, Ethiopian diaspora in the Minneapolis-St. Paul area. There are a lot more black people living in the suburbs of Minneapolis-St. Paul. And it just so happens that as communities become more diverse, there becomes a fear among the people with money, who tend to be whiter, that they don't necessarily want to support people who don't necessarily seem to share their values, to use an obvious euphemism. And so diversity, which is a necessary part, an inevitable part of America and Finland and Sweden and Norway, diversity seems to be necessary for the continued labor force growth, but it also cuts against the political will to maintain a robust egalitarian policy. And I'm afraid of that. I am looking for, and I would challenge the next generation of American leaders to be the sort of leader that can make a rather historically unique case for multicultural egalitarianism, which says we're all in this together, not by virtue of religion, and not by virtue of skin color, and not by virtue of where our parents happened to live 50 years ago. We're all in this together because of some higher purpose. And that requires an incredibly crafty message of inspiration to move us beyond the tribalism that is unfortunately inscribed in our DNA.
Derek, thank you. On that note.